Family secrets. When psychiatrists blame all your problems on your mother, they may be right about something. My mother is a textbook case. A little bit of history about my mother. Already at an early age, I realized that my mother was very different from all other mothers. She was cheerful, elegant, and very outgoing. Physically, she was very attractive, with beautiful curves in all the right places. She was also a fiery redhead. You have no idea how many times people told me she looked like Anne Margaret or Susan Sarandon. At church, all the men seemed to go out of their way to talk to her. She was a magnet for men. I also noticed that my parents were an odd couple. As beautiful as my mother was, my father looked plain. He was a kind and gentle man, but as much as I hate to say it, he was overweight and unkempt. He was also quiet and unassuming. When I was little, I remember my mother often going out in the evenings without my father. She was always dressed fashionably and well, even very nicely, I think. I was always told it was for a women's group or some other church event. Many times she would come home very late, and in some cases not until the next morning. Being young, I never gave it a second thought or questioned her actions. For our family, it was just business as usual. I remember often being at home with my father in the evenings when my mother was not home. Dad would also get us girls ready for school the next morning while Mom was home sleeping. Again, I was young and didn't think much about it. As much as she was a social butterfly, she lacked parenting skills. She wasn't a nurturer and certainly didn't spend more time with me than she needed to. I remember my father being more nurturing than my mother. My mother seemed to have different priorities. My mother came from a non-religious family. My father made sure that we never had anything to do with my mother's relatives. When I met them a few times, I realized that they were wildly different from the people I had been trained to associate with, and not at all like church people. My father not only shielded me and my siblings from her side of the family, but also from the world outside the church. Of course, as a kid, she was just my mom. As a teenager, and later, I started noticing little things and wondering what had been going on all these years. There were 2 traumatic events in my life related to my mother that opened my eyes and made me realize what was going on. This is a story about the first event. In the spring of my 19th birthday, my father announced that members of a Scottish church choir that was touring our area were coming to visit us. They would be staying with us for a week. He told us that this person would be a man and that he would be sleeping in the basement on a fold-out couch. I objected since the basement is my property, but I was persuaded. I didn't give it much thought or consideration, imagining an old bore who lives with his mother. What kind of person sings in the church choir? A few months later, I came home for dinner, and to my surprise, there was a young, sexy-looking guy sitting at the table. I was pleasantly surprised but confused at the same time. Who is this? Why was he here? I had completely forgotten about the guest from the church choir we were hosting. I was overwhelmed by his handsome appearance as I chose my words. He had gorgeous blue eyes that made my heart beat faster. "April, this is Liam from Scotland. He's going to be staying with us for a week," my mom said with a wide grin on her face. Handsome is an understatement. He was a few years older than me, with long hair and a tattoo. He looked like he'd just stepped off the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. He belonged in a rock band, not a church choir, and he had a beautiful Scottish accent. I was blown away. I don't think I've ever smiled like that at a family dinner. This was going to be a fun week. I was dating a guy at the time, but he had nothing in common with Liam. That week, Liam became my #1 priority, as I quickly became unavailable to my boyfriend. The first few days he was with us, I hardly saw him. My parents were both working, and I had a summer job. Liam had a busy schedule. He had choir practice in the evening and practice during the day. Nevertheless, as soon as I got home from work, I would change into tight outfits. It was summer, so I wore the flimsiest top I could find, and always in short shorts or skirts. When I saw Liam, I always tried to tease him and flirt with him. A few times I caught his eyes on me. I knew I had piqued his interest. However, I also noticed that my mom was very attentive to Liam. Maybe a little too attentive? She was also dressed more dressy than usual. I think I saw more of my mom's cleavage that week than ever before. She kept touching it in a playful way. She was all over him, but that's just the way my mom is. She's always been a very touchy person, so I think she's a good host. I found out that Liam would have the middle of the week off in his busy choir schedule. It was the opportunity I had been waiting for. I told work that I had an appointment for the afternoon and needed to leave at noon. I knew my parents were at work and my younger sister was away at church camp. I would get home early and spend the day with Liam, alone. I was excited about my plan and all the possibilities. I hurried home that afternoon and undid a couple buttons on my blouse and pulled up my skirt before I entered the house. I couldn't wait to be alone with Liam. I knew from our previous interactions that there was chemistry between us. I had every intention of seducing Liam this afternoon. As I entered the house, I heard a noise coming from upstairs. I knew it wasn't my father. He was at work and his car was gone. I walked to the stairs and stopped to listen. There were moans and grunts coming from the upstairs bedrooms. It sounded like someone was in pain or discomfort. Was it Liam? Who else could it have been? Is Liam not feeling well? What was he doing upstairs in the bedrooms? Could it have been an intruder? I was terrified, tiptoeing slowly and quietly up the stairs. I realized that the sounds were coming from my parents' room. The door was ajar, but I was too scared to look in, so I just held my breath and listened. As I listened, I heard soft moans and then the unmistakable sound of a mattress creaking. What the hell? Who's doing this in my parents' room? Mustering up my courage, I peeked through the doorway and saw Liam piling on top of the girl with his legs spread. What the hell? Where did Liam find the girl? What nerve for him to bring a girl into the house, let alone bring her into my parents' room? I was frustrated and disappointed as I turned away to sneak back up the stairs. And that's when I heard the unmistakable voice. My mother. Holly, it wasn't some girl. It was my mother. No, it can't be my mother. My brain must be playing tricks on me. I quickly went back to the door to look inside again. What I saw left a scar for the rest of my life. I was in shock. I couldn't realize what I was seeing. I immediately ran down the stairs and out of the house crying. My emotions were running high as I tried to rationalize what I had just seen. I didn't know where to run, so I ended up in the library and stayed there until closing time. I couldn't go home and see my mother, or father for that matter. Trying to make sense of the day's events, I returned home and went straight to bed. I couldn't sleep, for obvious reasons. My thoughts were still racing through my head. All I could think about was Liam, my mother, and my poor father. The vision of what I saw imprinted itself into my consciousness. My whole world just turned upside down. I began to remember all those strange events from the past that seemed strange at the time, but that I didn't understand or realize when I was young. Everything started to come together, making sense. I remembered several occasions when I came home from school to find a man in the house. My mom always told me they were coming in on church business. Sometimes, though, they would come down from the bedroom. I was a child and thought nothing of it. I even remember meeting Mr. Graham at the house on more than one occasion. I didn't pay much attention to it, for he was almost a member of the family. Much later, I learned that Mr. Graham had a long affair with my mother. I remembered a neighbor who often sat with my mother and drank wine. He was married, but he stayed alone with my mother. Alcohol was not allowed in the house, and at the time I thought they were drinking juice. I didn't know what wine was or what a wine bottle looked like, but now I do. It was all coming together. My mother cheated on my father. Do you realize how hard it is for a child to accept that, even when all the evidence is staring you right in the face? All my childhood, all my strict upbringing in the church, was it all a deception? I couldn't tell my father. It would break his heart, or perhaps he already knew. I decided not to confront my mother. I came to the conclusion that nothing good would come out of all this drama. So, if it involved my family, I decided to pretend I hadn't seen anything. One thing was certain, I couldn't let the affair between Liam and my mother continue. It wasn't going to happen again. Liam had 3 days before he had to leave. I had to do something about it. It was about 3 a.m, and I was too upset to sleep. I needed to meet Liam. I went down to the basement where he was sleeping. I turned on a small lamp and woke him up. I got angry and told him everything I thought. He had no idea what I was so upset about. I told him that I had seen everything during the day and that he owed me an explanation. He apologized and was brutally honest with me. He basically told me that my mother had been flirting with him since he arrived. He said she was very aggressive. He had been home alone all morning when she came home early from work and lashed out at him. Oh shit, It occurred to me that that was my plan too. She'd just gotten ahead of me. As frustrated as I was, all I could think about was how good he looked sitting in his bed shirtless. He was very kind and understanding towards me. He asked me to sit on the bed with him, hugged me, and comforted me. I asked him to stay away from my mother. He said he would try, but she would be the aggressor, not him. He said it would be very hard to say no to my mother. Hell, I knew he was right. I know what she's like. She doesn't take rejection very well. And then it hit me. I told Liam that I wasn't going to leave him for the rest of his stay here. I needed his schedule, and I wanted to make sure my mother didn't get another chance. He smiled and put his hand on my bare thigh. He looked at me with his baby blue eyes, and I was at his mercy. As angry as I had been when I confronted him, I wanted him now. I practically pounced on him. The whole day had been filled with so many emotions that I needed a release, and Liam was it. Without any foreplay, I pulled off his boxers in a frenzy and mounted him. I started aggressively riding him as hard as I could. The springs in the old sliding carriage could not withstand my enthusiasm. They creaked loudly and strained. I added a squeal of delight to the noise. I wanted my mom to hear her daughter with Liam. I wanted her to be jealous. I wanted her to know I was watching her. I wanted her to know that Liam favored me. He was mine now. I was so horny and hot that I began to feel happiness almost immediately. I trembled. Liam finished. I sank down onto his chest in exhaustion, knowing full well that my mom was sound asleep and had probably heard everything. I hoped she had. That was just the beginning. We spent the rest of the night together. For the rest of the week, I didn't leave Liam's side. I demanded Liam, and my mom knew it. Every night, as soon as my parents went to bed, I would sneak downstairs and spend the night with him. I wasn't taking any chances that Mom would sneak up on me at night. Mom knew I was sleeping with Liam, but she never said anything. For the past 3 nights, Liam and I had a lot going on. I made sure Liam was satisfied and spent, just in case my mother had any ideas. Liam returned to Scotland a very happy man. The following story about my mother is a scary second event that rocked my world. If you can believe it, it was a more intense trauma to my psyche than the story with Liam. And I'll tell you about her later,